The phone that connected over 1 billion people started as a paper mill on a riverbank in Finland. For most of its life, Nokia didn't make anything you could call. It made rubber boots, car tires, toilet paper, electrical cable, the kind of company you would walk right past without a second thought. Then in less than 20 years, this boot manufacturer became the most valuable company in Europe and put a phone in the pocket of nearly half the planet. So how does a company that spent 100 years making galoshes end up building the device that defined the modern world? And why did the very same company throw it all away? It was 1865, and a Finnish mining engineer named Frederick Idestam was standing on the banks of the Tamerkoski Rapids in the town of Tampere, watching water rush past a building that would become a wood pulp mill. Finland was not even an independent country yet. It was a grand duchy of the Russian Empire, a cold, forested corner of the world that most of Europe rarely thought about. But Idestam had noticed something. Finland had two things in enormous supply: rushing water and endless forests. One could power a mill, the other could feed it. And paper, in 1865, was about to become one of the most in-demand products on Earth. A few years later, Idestam opened a second mill 15 kilometers away on the banks of a river called the Nokian Virta, near a small town named Nokia. The river had better hydropower than the first site, and it gave the company the name the entire world would eventually recognize. By 1871, the business was officially Nokia AB. For now, it made one thing: paper. Nobody was paying attention to Nokia back then. It was a regional paper company in a country most people could not find on a map. That was about to change, but not in any way Idestam could have predicted. Because around the turn of the century, Nokia started branching out into electricity generation, and that move caught the eye of a completely different company, the Finnish Rubber Works, founded by a man named Edward Polon in 1898. The Rubber Works made exactly what the name suggests: galoshes, car tires, rubber boots, the heavy waterproof footwear that Finnish workers wore through brutal winters. The Rubber Works wanted Nokia's hydropower, so it bought the company. Then a third business joined the family, the Finnish Cable Works, founded in 1912 to make electrical cable, telephone, and telegraph wire as those technologies spread across the world. So now you had three companies tangled together: a paper maker, a rubber manufacturer, and a cable company. For decades, they operated as separate businesses under loose common ownership. Then in 1967, they formally merged into a single entity, the Nokia Corporation. And this is where the story gets genuinely strange, because the Nokia Corporation of the late 1960s made almost everything: paper, rubber boots, car and bicycle tires, electrical cable, televisions, personal computers, even a gas mask for the Finnish army. At one point, this company that would one day sell 1 billion phones was also manufacturing toilet paper. I'm not making that up. The phone company started as a toilet paper company, among other things, but buried inside this sprawling industrial conglomerate was a small, almost overlooked department: electronics. Nokia's electronics division started in the 1960s as something close to a side experiment. While the rest of the company was busy with rubber and cable and paper, a handful of engineers were tinkering with radio technology. They built radio telephones, the bulky early devices used by the Finnish military and emergency services. These were not consumer products. They were heavy, expensive, and almost nobody owned one. But that little electronics department was quietly learning how to send a voice through the air without a wire. And that knowledge would later become the exact thing that made Nokia the most valuable company on the continent. In the 1960s, though, it was just a curiosity in the corner of a boot factory. By the 1980s, that curiosity had turned into real products. In 1987, Nokia launched the Mobira CityMan, one of the first truly handheld mobile phones. By today's standards, it was a monster. It weighed around 800 grams, nearly 2 pounds, and cost the equivalent of several thousand euros, a status symbol for the wealthy and almost nobody else. But it got a publicity boost money simply cannot buy. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was photographed using a city man to place a call from Helsinki to Moscow. The image went around the world, and in Finland, the phone earned a permanent nickname. People started calling it the Gorba. Suddenly, the boot company from Finland, the company that made the phone, was a world leader. Through the 1970s and into the 80s, under CEO Kari Kairamo, Nokia chased growth aggressively. It expanded across Europe. It bought up television manufacturers and electronics firms. By the mid-1980s, the company had become 11 separate industrial groups, each pulling in its own direction, each with its own idea of what Nokia should be. On paper, it looked like an empire. Underneath, it was buckling. For a while, things actually seemed fine. The company was big, diversified, growing. That didn't last. The debt was piling up. The 11 divisions were competing with each other for resources, and then a series of disasters hit all at once. In 1988, Kari Kairamo, the CEO who had driven all that expansion, died by suicide. The company he left behind was financially stretched and directionless. His successor, Simo Vuorilehto, inherited a mess and immediately started selling off pieces. But before the restructuring could take hold, Finland was struck by the worst recession in its history. And then came the blow that nearly finished Nokia entirely. The Soviet Union, one of Finland's largest trading partners, collapsed. Overnight, a huge chunk of Nokia's market simply vanished. The company lost over $200 million across 1991 and 1992. There were serious conversations about whether Nokia should be broken up and sold for parts. The boot and paper giant was on the edge of the grave. And that's when the one person who saw a different future stepped forward. His name was Jorma Ollila. He was a former Citibank banker who had joined Nokia in 1985, and by 1992, he was running the company's small, unglamorous mobile phone division. When the board handed him the job of CEO, Nokia was a wounded conglomerate desperately trying to survive. Ollila looked at the wreckage and made a decision that sounded at the time completely insane. He didn't want to save all of Nokia. He wanted to kill most of it. If you're finding this story interesting, take a second to subscribe. I cover the rise and fall of the world's biggest companies every week. So here's where the gamble actually begins. By 1994, Ollila had convinced Nokia's board to do something almost no company its age has the nerve to do. They agreed to divest everything that fell outside of two divisions, telecommunications networks and mobile phones. Everything else was on the chopping block. The rubber business that had defined the company for nearly a century, gone. The cable works, sold. The paper operations, the consumer electronics, the televisions, all of it, dismantled and sold off piece by piece. 130 years of industrial history deliberately taken apart. Ollila's vision for where Nokia would be by the year 2000 was 4 words: focused, global, telecom-oriented, value-added. He was betting the entire company, the boots, the paper, the cable, the lot, on a technology that most ordinary people in 1994 had never used and didn't think they needed: the mobile phone. And the timing of that bet was almost too perfect. Because right as Nokia was going all in, the world was adopting a new wireless standard called GSM, the system that would let mobile phones work across borders and across continents. This is what made the gamble pay off. Nokia did not just adopt GSM, it got there first. In late 1992, the company released the Nokia 1011, the first mass-produced GSM phone in the world, named for the day it launched. While competitors were still betting on local or short-range technologies, Nokia understood that the future of the phone would be global and built for it before almost anyone else. The company poured everything into research and design, and the phones that came out the other side were small, reliable, and easy to use at a moment when the entire planet was suddenly ready to go wireless. Then came the part that turned a Finnish survivor into a household name everywhere. The little 4-note melody that played when a Nokia phone rang, the slogan, "Connecting People," that appeared on screens in over 150 countries. By 1998, Nokia did something almost unthinkable for a company that had nearly died 6 years earlier. It overtook Motorola to become the largest mobile phone manufacturer on Earth. The bootmaker from Finland was now #1 in the world. For a stretch of years, Nokia was not just winning, it was untouchable. In the early 2000s, Nokia controlled somewhere around 40% of all mobile phones sold on the planet. 40%. That is the kind of number that makes competitors give up entire markets. The company released a phone for every budget and every continent. And one device in particular became legendary, the Nokia 3310. It was nearly indestructible, the phone that launched 1,000 jokes about surviving drops, falls, and disasters that would shatter anything else. It came loaded with a game called Snake that swallowed millions of hours of human attention. For a huge part of a generation, your first phone was a Nokia, possibly your second and third too. Nokia became the pride of an entire nation. At its peak, this one company accounted for a massive share of Finland's exports and economic output. A country of barely 5 million people had produced the most dominant technology company in the world. And Nokia was even an early pioneer of the smartphone, releasing internet-capable communicator devices back in the 1990s, long before most people knew what a smartphone was, which makes what happened next so hard to understand. In 2007, a company from California walked onto Nokia's turf and held up a slab of glass with no keyboard, the iPhone. And inside Nokia, the reaction was not panic, it was something closer to a shrug. Nokia's engineers had built phones that could survive being run over by a truck. They looked at the iPhone, with its fragile glass screen and its weak battery life and its lack of a physical keyboard, and many of them decided it was a toy, a gimmick that serious phone buyers would never take seriously. But that confidence was a warning sign, and Nokia ignored it. The real problem was buried in Nokia's software. The company ran its phones on an operating system called Symbian, built for an era of buttons and small screens, not for the touch-driven, app-driven world the iPhone had just kicked off. Nokia had the hardware, the factories, the brand, and distribution in over 150 countries. What it did not have was an operating system that could compete in the new game. And while Nokia hesitated, a second threat appeared from a different direction entirely. Android from Google, given away to every other phone maker for free, started eating the entire mid-range of the market that Nokia had owned. By 2011, Nokia's new CEO sent an internal memo to staff that has become famous in business history. He compared the company to a man standing on a burning oil platform, forced to choose between the flames behind him and the freezing water below. The message was blunt: Nokia was on fire, and standing still meant death. The company made a desperate bet, abandoning its own software to partner with Microsoft and build phones around Windows. The phones were, by many accounts, genuinely well-made. The market did not care. By then, consumers wanted an iPhone or an Android, and Windows phones were neither. The decline was brutal and fast. The market share that had once been 40% collapsed. The stock cratered. The brand that had defined the mobile phone for a decade became, in just a few years, a cautionary tale. And in 2013, Nokia agreed to sell its mobile phone business, the heart of everything Alila had bet the company on, to Microsoft. The deal closed in 2014. The company that had built the phone in nearly everyone's pocket was effectively out of the phone business. So that is the part of the story everyone remembers, the fall. But it is not actually the end, because Nokia never died. Remember those two divisions Alila kept back in 1994? Mobile phones and telecommunications networks. The phones are gone, but the networks division is very much alive. Today, Nokia is one of the largest builders of telecommunications infrastructure on Earth, making the equipment that carries 5G and the backbone of the modern internet. You probably do not see its name anymore, but there is a good chance the data on your phone, the phone that is not a Nokia, is traveling through Nokia equipment right now. A company that began as a paper mill on a Finnish riverbank reinvented itself into rubber, then into cable, then into the most dominant phone maker the world has ever seen, then lost it all and reinvented itself one more time into the invisible plumbing of global communication. The boots and the toilet paper are long gone, but the river is still there, and so, somehow, is Nokia. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy videos like this, please feel free to like and subscribe for more.